Hi, it's Alex. I'm back and I hope everyone has had a great week. And as you can probably see from the title, I'm here with no product on my hair, meaning I washed it, I conditioned it, and that is it. No oils, no conditioners, no leave-ins, no moisturizers, just completely naked hair. And the reason I'm doing this is because one, I think it's really important to know what your hair looks like naturally on its own, so that as you apply products, you can see what it's actually doing. And you can't really figure that out unless you know what your texture and what the feel of your hair is without anything on it. And two, it's a really good opportunity to test porosity and figure out what the porosity of your hair is. If you don't know what that means, I'm gonna go ahead and define it, so don't worry. But just as a quick, look over, I personally feel like for the most part, with no product on my hair, I can definitely tell this front part is just a lot more frizzy. So I don't know if you can see by the camera, but this piece really has, zero definition. It's just super frizzy. And I already knew that. I knew that the front was kind of a different texture than the back of my hair, but it is something that I'm able to see and I'm able to notice because I have no product in. My hair feels a little dry, but to be honest, I'm actually surprised. It feels better than I thought it did, which maybe I'm using great products, but it actually does feel a little bit moisturized. So that's a great plus. So now on to the conversation about porosity. The first thing I want to address is, what is it? So essentially, porosity is the ability and the way that your hair both absorbs and maintains moisture. And by moisture, I mean water, products, anything that's passing through your hair. Porosity explains how your hair reacts to it. So when you think about porosity, there is high porosity, medium porosity, and low porosity. If you have high porosity hair, that means that your cuticles are a lot more open and they're a lot more receptive to moisture and products. But on the flip side, because they are open, water, products, and other types of chemicals also pass through it quickly. So a lot of times you'll hear someone with high porosity hair saying their hair often looks and appears drier. It soaks in moisture, and it also, so you don't know in terms of getting it wet and also drying time, it's easy to get wet and it's easy to dry quickly, but at the same time, it gets dry and frizzy quicker. Low porosity means that your cuticles are more tightly packed together, so they're more condensed. And that essentially means that it's hard for hair to get into the cuticle of your hair, but once it does, it kind of stays in there and stays compact. The next thing I want to talk about is, now that we know what porosity is and the difference between high and low porosity, how do you actually test for your porosity? So there's a lot of people that do what's called the cup test, which means that you take a piece of your hair, and it's important to do this while there is zero product in it, because product does affect the porosity of your hair. For example, if you do have oils that you like to use in your hair, oils often seal the cuticle. So you might do this cup test and you'll see that it's because it's sealing the cuticle, it is changing the porosity and the way that your hair is absorbing moisture. So you definitely want to do this on hair that has no product in it whatsoever. I'm actually going to do the cup test right now. I'm using North Carolina tap water, and I'm just going to go ahead. I've already actually cut a little piece. I don't mind cutting my hair, but I took a little piece of my hair. And I'm gonna take this cup right here. I'm gonna drop my hair in, and I'm essentially going to see whether or not my hair sits on top or it floats to the bottom. I'm gonna give it a couple minutes just because I wanna make sure that I'm getting an accurate reading. So I'm gonna keep talking while this hair is in this water cup and talk a little bit about what high porosity versus low porosity means and what it means for your hair care. So starting with high porosity, this means that your cuticles are more spread apart and open. Usually people with high porosity hair often complain of dry, frizzy hair, like I've mentioned before. But in terms of actually what that means for your hair care, you want to make sure that you're doing everything you can to close your cuticles so that you're not losing moisture. That means using a lot more heavy creams, heavier oils to make sure that your hair is sealed. So by heavier creams, I mean things like coconut oil, jojoba oil, Jamaican black castor oil. These are all these thicker oils that really are able to seal in the moisture that you are putting in your hair. Second tip I would give for people with high porosity hair is to use a blast of cold water right before you get out the shower. And I would recommend this because heat actually opens up the cuticles more. So if you have high porosity hair, your cuticles are most open when they are warm in the shower. So when you do use that blast of cold water, it helps to seal the cuticles and seal in the moisture that you have with your conditioner. The third and probably the most important thing is to 100%, if possible, avoid heat. And I would say this because just like moisture and products get into your hair easily, heat can get into your hair easily. So next up, I want to talk about some tips and tricks for low porosity hair. One thing I would mention is actually the opposite of what I said for high porosity, which is to actually use a little bit of heat when you are deep conditioning. So I've talked about this in a couple other videos, but by heat, I mean using hair steamers, using heated shower caps when you're deep conditioning, just to make sure that the conditioner is actually getting through all the layers of your hair. So when you do have these tightly packed cuticles, a lot of times they're closed off, and so you'll find that conditioners don't work if all you do is put them on and just let them sit on top of your hair. It's going to basically sit there and not penetrate through. So you actually need that extra heat to open up your cuticles a little bit to make sure that that moisture is actually getting in the hair. The second tip I would give for low porosity hair is to focus on using lighter oils as opposed to heavier oils. So in my high porosity tips, I said it would be good to use heavier oils like coconut oil and Jamaican black castor. For low porosity, I would suggest using lighter oils to moisturize, like vitamin E oil, sweet almond oil, because they are not going to create product buildup. So when you do have tightly bound low porosity hair and tighter cuticles, a lot of times you will experience product buildup because the products will essentially sit on top of your hair as opposed to penetrating inside. So you'll sometimes see like an extra white film, or you'll just see these like product flakes, and it is because things are sitting on top of your hair. And so if you're using lighter oils, you could potentially not experience that as often. The third tip I would give is to cleanse your hair often. This is because when you do have high porosity hair and the products are sitting on top, like I mentioned before, it does create product buildup. Product buildup and various products can clog your scalp, clog your pores, and it can actually prevent growth and make your hair look really dull. So hopefully those tips are helpful, and I'm gonna go ahead and go back to my cup test just to see how my hair is doing. All right, so it's been about 5 minutes of sitting there in my hair, and I'm gonna go ahead and bring it up close. As you can see, or hopefully be able to see, my hair is kind of sitting, it is submerged, but it's sitting at the top of this cup. Something that I expected because I've done this test before, but I do have low porosity hair, or lower porosity hair. It's not sinking down to the bottom, meaning that I do have tighter cuticles. So while for the most part, porosity is genetic, altering your hair in terms of adding color, adding heat, adding chemicals can change the porosity of your hair. So when I used to get perms and when I used to straighten my hair all the time, I actually did have high porosity hair. But as I've started to avoid heat, as I've started to really deep condition, my hair has gone back to what it naturally is, which is low porosity hair. I know in the past, I have had products that used to work and no longer work, and I couldn't figure out why. And a lot of it actually had to do with porosity. So that's one thing that I would keep in mind, is just pay attention to your hair, pay attention to how it looks, how it feels, how it reacts to certain products, because it is something that does change, but porosity will really help with understanding why these changes are occurring. So I hope this video was helpful. I hope it was useful. If you are someone that has ever done a porosity test or are interested in doing the porosity test, I would love to hear more about in the comments below. I am not an expert. I'm still researching and learning on my own, but I really appreciate you watching, and I'll be back next week.